Hey everybody, it's spring break and early, and you're probably thinking, yeah, James has gone traveling again. Well, yes and no. It is spring break. We have traveled for one night to my hometown of San Angelo, and actually, I may just stare off into the distance every now and then because my grandmother's house is right over there. My junior high is right over there. High school stadium is right there. The neighborhood that I grew up in, I could see the treetops, and the road to our ranch was right out that direction, just past those hills. And I might get a little bit distracted. We were supposed to go on a bigger trip than this, but different circumstances converged just right and canceled all of those plans. And that is actually what happens to Jesus in Mark chapter 7, starting verse 24. As you know, if you've been following our studies so far, and if not, all of this is available in the archives. We have been looking at Jesus, and he has been traveling, and he's been trying several times to get a little peace and quiet. He needs some time to recuperate, to rebuild his strength, because ministry was overwhelming and hard, and his disciples were worn out. And as you know, he tried to get across a lake, and when he got to the other side, more things converged and changed his plans, and it went completely wackadoo. And so then he decided to go back to the other side of the lake, and halfway there they got in a storm, and he had to walk out on water and deal with the apostles and save their lives and all that good stuff. Everything just went wackadoo. Well, now he's in another town. He is in the region of Tyre, and he is around actually a more Gentile crowd. And so probably was thinking, could get a little bit more peace and quiet. It says he's trying to stay under the radar, but you guessed it, things converged. His plans got changed, and things went, a little bit wackadoo. So that's where we're going to be, Mark chapter 7, verse 24, and this time a little bit of a twist. Jesus has his mind changed by a pretty sarcastic but believing lady. So grab your Bible and let's dive in. Okay, so this is really one of my favorite stories in this part of the Gospel of Mark. Again, it's a time where Jesus is really busy. They're all really worn out. They're trying to get a little bit of rest. He's trying to stay off the radar because all of his attempts so far to do that have failed, but he still needs some time not to be the center of everything. Isn't that amazing? The Son of God took time not to be the center of everything, and yet his creation, people, we're always trying to be. We could probably learn something there. That's a little bonus, think on that, chew on that. And let's go into the text. Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. "First, let the children eat all they want," he told her, "for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." "Lord," she replied, "even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And then he told her, "For such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." She went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Now, this is a pretty cool story, but it's not just a story. This is history. This is what happened. This is what Jesus did, and it reveals some things about who Jesus was and is, and it reveals some things about us. This woman who comes to him, a little bit of background, it says that she was a Greek woman and a Syrian Phoenician, and basically the most important part of that story is it means that she was a Gentile. She was not a Jew, and that is really kind of the cornerstone of this whole story. She comes to Jesus at a time when he's trying to lay low because she's heard some things about him. She's heard that he is healing people, that he is raising the dead, that he is driving out impure spirits. Remember, earlier in Mark, he has driven out a legion of impure spirits from a man in a cemetery, and word about that got all over the place, and it got to her house all the way over in Tyre. Go look at a map. It's not that close, but word had gotten there, and she knows that if her daughter has any hope of having this spirit driven out of her, Her hope is Jesus of Nazareth. And that is really important for us to get. She is a Gentile who has heard about Jesus and believes. The last part of chapter 7 and even the ending of chapter 6, there is a struggle among the Jewish followers of Jesus, referred to here as the crowd, in the big multitudes. There is a struggle for them to really grasp that Jesus is not just a miracle worker, but he is the Son of God. And being the Son of God, that comes with an authority. And authority is set up in parts by the covenant you have with that authority. And covenant means, of course, agreements and rules and regulations. And don't you just love agreements and rules and regulations? They sound great when you're trying to keep your neighbor from parking his Monte Carlo in the middle of his yard and putting a tank in the trunk so that he can have a hot tub out there. But rules and regulations and agreements also sometimes come back to have unintended consequences, like when a suburb of Dallas tried to ban pickup trucks of homeowners from even being out where they could be seen, right? There are unintended consequences, and sometimes those things seem a lot like snootiness. And sometimes even the best rules and regulations breed a form of snootiness that is not supposed to exist. And sometimes it goes farther than just someone being snotty. Sometimes it goes into outright discrimination. And that was the case in first century Israel and all around that region in the relationship between Jews and Gentiles. And so she hears about this Jesus, who is a Jew. She hears that he is the Messiah, the Son of God. You know, who is he? She believes. We don't know all the fine details of her beliefs, but she believes that he is the one that will heal her daughter. There's one small hitch, and Jesus brings it up. His mission, by covenant, by rules, agreements, and regulations, by covenant, is that he goes first to the Jews and then to the Gentiles. Paul echoes that theme in Romans chapter 1, verses 16 to 18, when he says, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God unto salvation for all who believe, first to the Jew and then to the Gentile. First to the Jew and to the Gentile. Now that wasn't discrimination. That was a promise to God's called out holy people. It was his covenant, his relationship with them over hundreds of years, that they would receive the promised kingdom and the Messiah first. Not exclusively, but first. It was meant to be a blessing. But you know how it is with humans, right? As humans, we twist sometimes these blessings into ways to codify our own bigotry and discrimination. And that's what had started to happen. And so you have that layer in this story of what's going on. You have the covenantal layer, which is that Jesus really does have a first priority, covenantal priority, to bring the gospel and to bring the kingdom and to bring even these miracles and healings first to the Jew, then to the Gentile. Okay, so that's part of the picture. Also part of the picture is the attitude that Jesus knows she expects. And I think that part of what Jesus is doing in his interaction with this woman is putting the way that the Jews and Gentiles had been getting along and not getting along on full display. I think he says what he says that we'll look at here in a second. On full display, actually to expose it, not to affirm it. What am I talking about? Let's look at the text again. So she comes to him and says, falls at his feet, begs him, my daughter has an impure spirit, please heal her, like any good, desperate, believing parent is going to do when they hear that Jesus is in town. Don't know how she heard, but she heard. And so Jesus, we expect, you and I, we expect Jesus the way she expects Jesus to do something about it. She didn't come to be turned away. She expects Jesus to do something about it, as we would in that circumstance. We all love our kids, and we want what's best for them, and we want healing for them when there are issues and problems and things like that. This is extreme stuff. demon possession, impure spirits, demons, it's interchangeable language. And so it's demon possession. She wants her child healed. And we expect, because we've seen enough of Jesus healing, he's just going to do it. And Jesus does not just immediately heal her daughter. Instead, he says something that can seem a bit baffling. He says, first, verse 27, first, let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Okay, there are a few things here. First, none of us likes whenever we put in a request for help to hear you're seventh in line, second in line, 10th in line, 100th in line, whatever. We don't like to hear it, right? When I was a kid, again, I can see the neighborhood right over there where this Walmart used to be. And they always had this sign up over the registers back in those days that said Walmart, where you are always, and always was in a different script and underlined, where you are always next in line. And I remember one time I was there with my mom and she was looking at that sign and she started laughing and she said, isn't that the truth? We are always next in line. Never up there, always next, because it was long, long lines. None of us like that, okay? I don't. I avoid lines as much as I can in every way that I can. I do. I am not a line person. So she gets told by Jesus, it's not your turn. You're not next in line. And we hear that, and we're about as happy about that as we would be at Walmart, right? And so we look at this text and we go, that doesn't sound like Jesus. It doesn't sound like Jesus to tell a desperate mother, well, what am I supposed to do? The children who are supposed to receive it are receiving it, and they're not done yet, and it would be right to take bread from their mouth and give it to dogs. And that's when the next slap comes, right? He says it wouldn't be right to give it to dogs. And I've heard a lot of different explanations by people better in Greek language than myself that he's not really saying dogs like a stray dog out on the street. He's not really being insulting, although all of us hear first quite the insult. In our language, in our time, and in our culture, that would be an insult. What some of these linguists say is that in that time and in that context, which is where we always need to look first, is that this was a term that actually was closer to a term of endearment, that he's not saying, just saying, you dog, that he's saying a term something like pet. If you're a fan of Vera, the British mystery, she likes to call people pet. That it's more like that, but honestly, I've heard that explanation several times, again, from people smarter than myself, and I get where they're coming from, and they're probably right. I'm not disagreeing with it. It doesn't help me. Okay? I hear that, and I go, yeah, but he's still saying no. And none of us really likes a no. I mean, we like the Garth Brooks song about, thank God for unanswered prayers, which really are no prayers. There's no such thing as an unanswered prayer. We do sometimes get no, and sometimes that no is absolutely a blessing, but not in this case. No would not be a blessing. It's not your turn. There are other people ahead of you in line. My promise is to them first. None of that is comforting. And he doesn't even go into all that explanation because she knows this already, okay? I think he's putting her circumstance, her larger circumstance, on full display. I think he's not doing this just for her. I think he's doing this for the disciples that surround him. I think he's doing this for some of the Jews that might have been overhearing the conversation and thinking, yeah, she's not one of us. This is for us. This is not for her. And I think he's actually putting their attitude through the ringer. Squeeze some of that discriminatory, bigoted thinking out. I really think this is probably, it's just my own speculation, but I think this is probably what Jesus is up to. And I think we need this because far too much of this kind of thinking still exists. And it's not, Jew-Gentile anymore. Sometimes it's white-black, sometimes it's east-west, sometimes it's north-south, sometimes it's American and foreigner, sometimes it's Russian and Ukrainian, sometimes it's we find ways to make a difference between us and them, whoever the us is and whoever the them would be, right? And I think Jesus is always about putting this front and center and saying, but is this really the way it's supposed to be? Even with the covenant God had with Israel, is this what God meant? Is that the way God wanted you to think? I think he displays the conventional wisdom when he says, it wouldn't be right for me to take bread out of the chosen children and give it to you, pet. And no matter how, again, you hear that, right? It may be a term of endearment, but it's not right. We go, but why would Jesus say something that's not right? I think Jesus is holding up a mirror and saying, hey, do you see how this looks when we say it like this? Do you see how it sounds when you talk about other people as them and they and less than and other? When you use language, those people, we do this in a lot of ways. We still do this far, far too much. And God never intended that to be our attitude. And I think Jesus is trying to show us that. Look how this looks, even when it comes out of the Savior's mouth, the mouth of the Holy One, the Righteous One. It sounds awful. And it was meant to, I think. So the woman replies. Her reply is highlight of the story for me because it's biblical authorization that every now and then a little bit of smart aleckness can be blessed. And for me, I kind of need to know that. Don't you need to know that? Okay, so here's what it says next. Lord, she replies, even the dogs eat under the table. Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. I like this woman. Don't you like this woman? Jesus likes this woman. Very quick-witted. She says, yeah, but even us pets get to eat under the table. Couldn't you just let a little something fall off? I love it. I absolutely love it. And Jesus loved it too. And he says, for such a reply, you may go. The demons left your daughter. That was good. And I love that. And I think Jesus was laughing at this point. How would you not be? This lady has said to Jesus, the perfect comeback. Yeah, but a dog even gets a scrap off the table now and then. Just drop a little something, Jesus. And so he does. You ever feel like you're that lady? I bet you do. I think we all do. There are times when it seems like everybody else is ahead of us in line. And even when it comes to our prayer life, somebody else is ahead of us. I've been praying. And God has answered theirs, and he's answered theirs, and he's answered theirs. But God, could you throw me a bone? Just throw me a bone, Jesus. And he does. You need to know that. He does. What you need to know is to stick with it. Jesus likes a plucky faith. Jesus likes a tenacious believer who will look at him and say, but Jesus, just scraps. I'm not asking for the whole table. Just scraps, God. He apparently likes that. Keep knocking. Keep asking. Keep appealing to him. Luke 18, he says, the lady goes to the judge and keeps knocking on the door and driving the judge nuts. And he was an unjust, righteous judge who didn't even like people. And Jesus says, if he eventually gives in and answers, don't you know that the God who loves you is going to give in and answer? This lady knew that. And Jesus, in her example, wants you to know that. Do not give up. Jesus loves you, has an answer for you, and he loves it when you keep coming back, and he loves you when you are a tenacious believer who keeps holding on to hope and keeps holding on to faith and says, Jesus, you ain't answered yet, but I know you will, and if all I get is what's left over when you get done blessing everybody else, I'll take it, God. And he'll do it. He will bless you. I don't know what that is that you feel like. Maybe you are the dog sitting there begging. I don't know what that is, but know this. God does. He sees you. Jesus has his eyes on you, and he wants to answer you. So keep asking, keep knocking, keep pleading, because he has it for you. And if you need us to join you in the asking, not saying our prayers do any better than yours do, but we'll be glad to keep knocking and just make the knocks at the door even louder. Would you share those prayer requests with us, either in the comments below, or you can message us, and we'll be glad to keep things confidential just between us and God. We would love to pray for you. We would love to see God's blessing in your life. One of the best things happened to me this Sunday was a sister came up and said, hey, the other day you were talking about prayer requests, and I didn't want to come up front and ask for prayers, but I nearly did. And she said, but I went home and I prayed about it, and God answered in incredible ways. And I just thought you wanted to hear about that. We'd love to hear about it. Share that in the comments below as well. God bless you. Have a great week, and I can't wait to see how God answers your plucky, smart alecky, hanging on to hope prayers, because God's going to answer.